my desktop's Aug Video, Thera Audio. When you get done with them, with both of them, you will have a finished file, and whether or not you selected to record audio in either one of them, you will have a finished file with video and audio, or not. When you get done with that, once you save the file, wherever it saves it to, you must then transcode it. Well, with FFmpeg, it's already been transcoded. It did it on the fly into MP4 format, generic MP4 standard, probably XVID, or XVID related. I'm sure it's not X264 because it's much more processor intensive than XVID, because it's a higher end codec, and plus it would probably be using AAC audio if it had X264 video. So because it's got an MP3 audio and a generic MP4 video label, I'm assuming the video codec's XVID-like. Anyway, with the Thera, with GTK Record My Desktop, you will have to transcode it before a lot of people would be able to play it. If you have MPlayer installed, you can probably play it by default. Same thing with VLC, but a lot of other programs can't, and you can't transcode it or edit it with a lot of programs. I believe if you import it into Kino, right here, which is a digital video editor, you can work. It can actually import it and convert it to a digital video file while it works with it. The problem with Kino is that Kino expects everything to be a 4:3 aspect ratio. Or I think you also have an option to work with 16:9, which is slightly widescreen. But if it's not in, no, actually it was only 4:3. You can export to 16:9, but even then that's not reliable. Kino's shitty. The only thing I've been using Kino for is like fade out effects, which actually I don't even use it for that anymore because you can do that with the command line, and text effects to actually make text. But actually I need to get around to figuring out how to do that with the command line too, because Kino just, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. The quality, no matter what, is way under par. But that's how you can choose between the different screencast programs. I recommend GTK Record My Desktop because it does not encode on the fly, which makes it slightly faster than FFmpeg on the command line. However, the finished product expects you to be able to transcode it to whatever format you want it in when it's finished. You probably play it on most Linux systems, but to be able to be compatible with almost every system, you're going to have to transcode it yourself, which means you got to know what you're doing with video transcoding. With FFmpeg, it's almost the exact same speed, but it outputs it to a generic MP4 file, which is going to be compatible with most systems. So if you're a novice video user, video editor, video enthusiast, whatever, if you're a novice, then you need to use FFmpeg's command, and I'll post this in my articles, how to use all this stuff. Right now I can't type it out or shit because you can't see it. But if you're an expert, or not at least a advanced video junkie, then I would recommend using GTK Record My Desktop and then just resampling and transcoding everything yourself when you're done. So, because if you're pretty good with video anyway, you're going to want it all to your own personal specifications and tastes, which means you won't have a double transcode essentially. Because when you encode to MP4, it's slightly lossy, whereas Aug and Thera are not as lossy, but they're not as supported either. Alright, I believe that concludes the screencasting. I can't think of anything else I should be covering, but then again, I'm half asleep. Just remember, 44,100 kilohertz on GTK Record My Desktop does not seem to work. And remember, if you're going to be muxing with other audio like sound files, like MP3s from a music collection, then you need to make sure it's all at the same sample rate, which means you got to know how to resample audio and transcode audio and video, which means you need to watch the DVD transcoding tutorial where I cover all that. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this for lack of anything else to think of. Yeah, one more thing that, oh, fuck. I just remembered. Here, let me give this a different name. I'm about to overwrite the file I just recorded for this video. I'll be pissed. Anyway, one more thing I just remembered to point out. And like I said, I've been comparing the two leading methods of screencasting, being the FFmpeg command line and GTK Record My Desktop. I do want to point one thing out. Like I said, I recommended GTK Record My Desktop for novice users and FFmpeg for expert users. And I didn't mention also that FFmpeg would probably have a slightly more of a lag, but because it transcoded on the fly. But I don't expect you'll be able to notice it. I mean, you got to really look. But there is one thing I forgot to mention. Going back to the desktop effects I mentioned a moment ago. As you can see here, I'm kind of screwing around with desktop effects. If I hit full screen, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but there's little, for lack of a better term, there's artifacts where the cube, the sides of the cube, the planes of the cube meet up. There's little white artifacts where the pixels do not geometrically fall right upon each other, or however to put it. They don't have a perfect joint because of the angle the cube's switching into. There is a small white spot in between some of the pixels, and it's very hard to notice. And after you get done transcoding it and resizing it, scaling it down to a reasonable size, it's probably going to disappear altogether. It's going to be blended out. But that was with GTK Record My Desktop. With FFmpeg, those artifacts are not there, which kind of surprised me. And I'm not sure why they wouldn't be. The only thing I can think of, and like I said, I don't know if you can see this, but where the planes join up, there's no white dots with FFmpeg on three-dimensional cubes. Or I don't know what you would consider that, SDL effects, whatever. Anyway, the only explanation I could think of is because FFmpeg transcodes into MP4 on the fly. It's actually, those little white dots actually wind up getting blurred out. But I can't even say that that's a reasonable explanation, because the image is just as sharp as it is with GTK Record My Desktop. So I really don't know why GTK Record My Desktop has artifacts in some of the higher end effects. But in its defense, I will also say that that's probably the only scenario you will ever notice that in. You probably do not get artifacts in any other scenario whatsoever with GTK Record My Desktop. And again, like I said, once you scale it down to a reasonable size, like here, as you can see, my finished products, I scale down to 832 by 512 because that's the same aspect ratio as my display, but at half the size. So once you scale it down like that, it's probably going to get eliminated altogether. Just as it eliminates pixels to scale down, you probably will not see them anymore at all. So that's one more thing that you can consider when making the decision on which desktop session recorder to use. Like I said, I recommend doing away with Istanbul if you used to use it, and switching to GTK Record My Desktop for novice users, or FFmpeg for expert users that want to fine-tune recording process. But even then, I still recommend GTK Record My Desktop because it does not transcode on the fly, which means less lag, even though the lag or bug or twitchiness between them is not even noticeable. Alright, now that concludes this video.